When afternoon arrived on Thursday, July 22, 1976, Lena Scofield was beginning to regret her decision to let her preteen daughter venture out alone. Dorothy had grown tired of waiting in line while her mother renewed her license, so for literally the first time ever, Lena agreed to let Dorothy leave independently, just across the parking lot to the J.M. Fields department store. Dorothy needed to return a pair of broken sandals she had bought for her sister and purchase a watch band for her brother's birthday. The plan was to take in a movie in Ocala and go to dinner before returning home. Lena handed Dorothy the keys and instructed her to meet by the family car when she finished shopping so they could proceed to the movies. Lena expected Dorothy to be waiting in the car when she completed the written test, but instead found herself waiting for her daughter. The Florida Highway Patrol Station was located on the southeast corner of the intersection of State Road 40 and 25th Avenue, with J.M. Field situated adjacent in the same parking lot. Dorothy only needed to walk perhaps 200 yards through a parking lot to reach the department store, a reasonable distance for a 12-year-old in the mid-1970s, particularly in what was considered a safe area with no traffic to cross. Lena's eyes swept the parking lot from end to end, but Dorothy wasn't in the car, by the car, or anywhere else visible. She made her way inside the department store to search for her daughter, walking around and conducting a thorough sweep of the entire floor, even having Dorothy paged multiple times over the store's intercom. When her daughter remained nowhere to be found, she returned to the Florida Highway Patrol office, hoping they had somehow missed each other and that Dorothy had gone back there after finishing her shopping. Dorothy wasn't there either, and when no one at the Highway Patrol office had seen her return, Lena became genuinely worried. Fortunately, she was already with law enforcement who knew what to do. She filed a missing persons report immediately. Sometime between 2:00 and 2:30 p.m. officers began tracking Dorothy's last movements, starting at the department store she had set off to visit. They confirmed that she had reached the return counter because a clerk distinctly remembered both Dorothy and the sandals, which were ultimately recovered and identified by her parents as the ones Dorothy had intended to return. The jewelry counter clerk also recalled dealing with Dorothy and selling her the watch band for her brother. Both transactions were documented and substantiated by the store employees, establishing that Dorothy was conducting business with these employees between 1:15 and 1:30 p.m. This timeline made officers confident that Dorothy had safely entered the store and, as of approximately 1:30 that afternoon, was likely still there by herself. After that point, however, no one they interviewed at the store, neither employees nor fellow shoppers, noticed Dorothy. They didn't observe anyone approach or speak with her, didn't witness her physically exit the store, and didn't see her walking in the parking lot. Not a single person reported seeing or hearing any commotion that day. The Ocala Police Department, Florida Highway Patrol, and family members searched the entire area, including a sizable parking lot with ongoing construction work. Despite the thorough effort, Dorothy Scofield had left that store and vanished completely. Initially, the Florida Highway Patrol led the investigation since they had handled the missing persons report, officially transferring the case to the Ocala Police Department the following day. Chief Bakken noted that the initial sentiment regarding missing young girls in that era was often dismissive. Authorities assumed they had simply run away to spend time with friends. Dorothy's older sister, Shelley Edwards, acknowledged that this belief may have persisted among law enforcement for too long. However, Chief Bakken emphasized that nothing in the case file suggested Dorothy was a runaway. She had left behind a jar full of her life savings and coins and cash at home, with no clothes missing. She had departed with nothing but the sandals for return and a few dollars in cash. There were no issues between Dorothy and her mother. They were enjoying a pleasant mother-daughter outing together, and Dorothy showed no indication of wanting to leave home. The runaway theory was quickly abandoned, and searches began immediately, extending beyond the local area around J.M. Fields to include the vast Ocala National Forest just west of the city. These searches commenced instantaneously using various methods: on foot, horseback, vehicle, and helicopter. The efforts expanded as hours passed, intensifying the following morning as investigators pushed into rural county areas after finding no trace of Dorothy near her disappearance site. The investigation achieved its first significant breakthrough when searchers ventured outside the shopping center on day 2. They concentrated on nearby areas along routes leading out of Ocala, particularly a small corner store approximately 10 to 15 minutes from the shopping center. Newbie's Corner essentially represented the last sign of civilization for travelers heading out of town, positioned at the crossroads of the state highway running through the forest. The establishment served as a crucial stop for forest travelers, offering everything from beverages and meals to fishing supplies. When investigators showed Dorothy's photograph to the clerk on duty, Rochelle immediately and unhesitatingly confirmed the sighting. She had seen the girl the previous day, right after 2:00 p.m. The timing aligned perfectly with when Dorothy was last observed at JM Fields, lending credibility to the clerk's account. Rochelle provided detailed observations that precisely matched Dorothy's appearance. She wore glasses, had braided hair, and was dressed in a red shirt with either blue jeans or blue slacks. Most significantly, while the girl had entered the store alone and purchased a Coke with a dollar bill, the clerk had also spotted a white man standing in the parking lot who appeared to be waiting for the girl. Although the clerk couldn't see the parking spots clearly from inside the store and never witnessed the girl actually getting into a vehicle or leaving with the man, she was certain the two were together. Chief Balkin clarifies that contrary to some reports, the clerk never indicated the girl appeared distressed. According to the documented statement, nothing seemed unusual about the girl's behavior in the store. This observation provided investigators with a crucial insight. If this girl was indeed Dorothy, she was likely familiar and comfortable with whoever accompanied her that day. With this sighting as their only tangible lead, investigators had a detective work with the clerk to create a composite sketch of the man in the parking lot. Although the clerk admitted she hadn't obtained a clear, comprehensive view of the suspect, the effort seemed worthwhile. When the composite was completed, the sketch bore a striking resemblance to someone very close to Dorothy's family. Her brother-in-law, Ronnie Carr. Dorothy lived with Ronnie, along with her entire family, following her parents' decision to move their two youngest children from Ohio to Florida the previous year. While building their own house, the family temporarily resided with their oldest daughter, Toni, and her family. Toni was married to Ronnie Carr, and they had two boys, creating cramped conditions in the single mobile home on about 40 acres of land in Citra. By this point, Dorothy would have known Ronnie very well. Chief Balkin acknowledges that composite sketches are generally unreliable based on his experience. But this particular sketch showed what he considered an uncanny resemblance to 29-year-old Ronnie Carr. The combination of factors began pointing investigators toward Ronnie. The theory that Dorothy's abductor was likely someone she knew, given the apparent lack of struggle at the department store, the resemblance to the composite sketch, and his close relationship with the victim. Ronnie's changing story about his activities that afternoon only heightened suspicion. Initially, he claimed he had been in his office all day. Later, under questioning, he modified his account, stating he had been collecting payments for an insurance company in Williston. He provided specific details, claiming his air conditioning hose had blown at a service station and mentioning particular customers he had visited. Detectives investigated these claims and found insurance policyholders who confirmed dealing with Ronnie that day. However, they could not verify the blown AC hose incident. The service station attendant stated that no one had broken down there that day, essentially invalidating that portion of his alibi. Even if Ronnie had been collecting payments in Williston as claimed, investigators found they could not account for approximately 2 hours of his time that day. Several factors made Ronnie appear increasingly suspicious: his changing story, his resemblance to the composite sketch, the fact that his office was only a block from Dorothy's abduction site, his knowledge of the family's plans for that day, the certainty that Dorothy would have willingly entered a vehicle with him. While at least 2 customers could place Ronnie in Williston for part of the day, his alibi was not airtight. If Ronnie was responsible, investigators and family members wondered about his motive. Both Chief Balkin and Dorothy's sister Shelley reported that, before the investigation began, the family had not noticed anything inappropriate about Ronnie's interactions with Dorothy. He had no criminal record and could be described as perhaps quirky, but nothing more concerning. However, witness statements revealed at least one incident that had given some family members pause. According to case file notations, during a family vacation to Daytona Beach not long before Dorothy's disappearance, Ronnie had brought Dorothy home alone, leaving the beach early. When questioned, he simply said she had wanted to go home and he had offered to take her. Family members found this somewhat peculiar. Why would a 12-year-old girl want to leave the beach to return to a farm in Citra, where there was little activity for miles around. The incident was significant enough to warrant notation in the case file, though at the time, no one had detected anything inappropriate between Ronnie and Dorothy. With only circumstantial evidence and suspicious feelings, detectives decided to apply pressure to Ronnie, hoping he might eventually reveal the truth. They subjected him to extensive testing. He failed multiple PSYCs, psychological stress evaluator, examinations, and polygraph tests. In an approach that would be considered completely unacceptable today, they even transported him to Orlando and administered sodium pentothal, a so-called truth serum. Sodium pentothal was believed in the 1970s to induce a stupor in which lying would be impossible, though this practice has since been proven unreliable and is now considered unethical and dangerous. The doctor's report stated he firmly believed Ronnie was telling the truth under the drug's influence. However, the contrasting results were striking. Ronnie failed 5 separate teeth tests and 3 polygraph examinations, all apparently administered within the first month after Dorothy's disappearance. The questions he failed concerned whether he had any knowledge of Dorothy's disappearance, whether he had been involved, and whether he knew her whereabouts. While none of these tests would be admissible in court, they motivated police to investigate Ronnie's background more thoroughly. As detectives delved deeper into his history, they discovered troubling information. They interviewed an 18-year-old woman who had been only 11 years old, around Dorothy's age, when she allegedly experienced inappropriate encounters with Ronnie Carr. According to the detective's report, this witness lived about a mile from the Carr Schofield trailer and knew Dorothy well. She recounted that the summer before Dorothy's family moved in with the Carrs, when Ronnie's wife Toni was hospitalized, Ronnie had asked her and her cousin to help clean his trailer in exchange for a pony. The witness described how Ronnie would engage in inappropriate physical contact with the girls, and once attempted to force his way into the bathroom while they were using it. She also recounted an incident where Ronnie offered her and her 13-year-old cousin a ride to a party. During the ride, he provided them with beer and cigarettes and asked inappropriate questions about their dating experiences and sexual activities. The witness stated that Ronnie had made inappropriate advances and that she believed he had become sexually aroused during these encounters. She mentioned that Ronnie had told the girls that if they wanted to know about sex, he would demonstrate. Perhaps most significantly, this witness told investigators that she thought Dorothy acted strangely around Ronnie, not as if she liked him, but as if she was afraid of him. She described an incident where Dorothy initially refused to ride into town with Ronnie, but was eventually persuaded to go, only to jump out of the car partway through the trip when she changed her mind. A second young girl who had been present during some of these alleged inappropriate interactions corroborated the account. These predatory behaviors had apparently never been reported to police when they occurred approximately 7 years earlier, but their emergence during the investigation was deeply concerning to detectives. These allegations had not been publicly known in the community or within the family. Dorothy's sister Shelley, who was in her 20s and living independently in 1976, had spent considerable time with Dorothy, Ronnie, and the rest of the family during weekend visits from Orlando. She reported that the family didn't suspect Ronnie of any wrongdoing. Ronnie had been cooperative throughout the investigation, even assisting with searches for his young sister-in-law. While Dorothy's sister Toni remained supportive of her husband, she also understood that detectives needed to investigate all possibilities. The entire family seemed sympathetic to the fact that investigators had to examine Ronnie as a suspect, even if it made them uncomfortable. No one vehemently defended Ronnie, but they also didn't believe he was capable of harming Dorothy. Even after Toni and Ronnie divorced years later, Toni never wavered in her belief that Ronnie would never hurt Dorothy. A detective's note in the case file from this period reads, "Case against Ronnie is all circumstantial. He looks like best bet so far." Even if Ronnie appeared to be the most promising suspect, investigators still didn't know Dorothy's fate. They continued tracking down sightings and comparing dental records of unidentified bodies found across the country, with FBI assistance. Every unidentified body discovered in the United States is entered into the system, and any that matched Dorothy's descriptors must be investigated. Every sighting proved to be a false alarm, and no recovered remains belonged to Dorothy. This brought both hope and despair. Hope that she might still be alive, but growing despair as the years passed without resolution. This pattern continued for a decade, then another, until despair overwhelmed any remaining faith. By 1999, more than 2 decades had passed since Dorothy's disappearance. While the passage of time made it increasingly likely that Dorothy was no longer alive, A new detective was assigned to the case, Mike Balkin, now determined that whoever was responsible would finally be held accountable. Balkin found himself under pressure from Dorothy's sister Shelley Edwards, who had learned he was working on the case. Her persistent phone calls and demands for action motivated him to take a direct approach. He decided to visit Ronnie Carr at his home in Bellevue, about 10 miles south of Ocala. Ronnie, now in his 50s and living with his new wife and young son, invited Balkin in when he appeared at the door. The two men sat at Ronnie's kitchen table for 2 hours discussing the case. During this conversation, Ronnie not only vehemently denied any involvement in Dorothy's disappearance, but pointed the finger at someone else, his own father, Dayton Dusty Carr. This accusation surprised Balkin, as Dusty had been almost as close to the original investigation as Ronnie himself. In the early days of the search, Dusty had offered his mobile home as a staging area for the family while they waited for news. However, according to Ronnie, his father had a reputation as a violent man who had been abusive toward his wife and children, leading to an estranged relationship that had only recently been repaired enough to allow Dusty to spend time with his hardened grandchildren. Dusty's alibi for the time of Dorothy's disappearance had been that he was babysitting his grandchildren at the mobile home in Citra. But now Ronnie was suggesting that this alibi might have been fabricated. According to the original story, Dusty and his wife had been at the home all day, with Dusty leaving only briefly to take trash to the dumpster down the road before returning immediately. Years later, however, Ronnie claimed that Dusty's wife had told another family member that she had lied to police about her husband's whereabouts that day. The alleged confession was that Dusty was supposed to go to the dump that day, but when he left, he never returned until late that night, and he acted strangely upon his return. Shelley Edwards confirmed that her family had always been suspicious of Dusty. She recalled her mother telling police that she believed she had seen Dusty driving behind them that day, following her and Dorothy into town. At the time, this might have seemed coincidental, but after Dorothy's disappearance, the family viewed it as potentially more sinister. Chief Balkin noted that he could not find records of this report in the case files, though this doesn't mean it didn't happen. Ronnie provided additional disturbing details about his father's behavior during the investigation. He described how Dusty had spent 2 full days at the highway patrol station, even sleeping there, and would follow people outside whenever they came in to provide information or be interviewed, making him privy to everything being discussed. While Dusty had initially offered his trailer as a staging area for the family, Ronnie claimed that something later caused his father to become enraged, throwing everyone out of the house. This led to a major family falling out, after which Dusty quickly moved with his wife to Eustis, Florida, in Lake County. According to Ronnie, father and son didn't speak for more than 20 years afterward. By the time Balkin was receiving this information, Dusty was already dead, making it impossible to confront him directly. However, Ronnie claimed that he had attempted to get a confession from his father on his deathbed. According to Ronnie's account, he leaned over his dying father in the hospital and said, "Dad, now's the time to set yourself free, to tell me what you did and how this ended for Dorothy, and make your peace with your God." Ronnie described his father's reaction as one of intense rage, despite being unable to speak. The dying man supposedly became furious. Ronnie interpreted this reaction as confirmation of his father's guilt, firmly believing that his father had abducted and killed Dorothy. However, Dusty never provided a deathbed confession. With Dusty dead, Balkin could only attempt to verify Ronnie's accusations by speaking with people who had known him. Specifically, he wanted to confirm the story that Dusty's wife, Evelyn, who went by Jean, had told her sister-in-law, Betty Kolb, about lying regarding Dusty's alibi. Balkin sent 2 detectives to interview the elderly Jean, hoping that with nothing left to lose, she might finally tell the truth. However, she adhered to her original story. Dusty was there that day, except for a few minutes when he went to the dump down the street and returned immediately. She insisted there was no way he could have been involved and that he never said anything to her about the case. John stated that Betty Kolb had lied about the alleged conversation and that she had no information that would aid in the investigation. She indicated she remembered the events of July 22, 1976, exactly as she had reported during a recorded statement shortly after Dorothy's disappearance. With Ronnie maintaining his father Dusty was the guilty party, Dusty now dead, and his wife sticking to her story about his whereabouts that day, the investigation found itself at another impasse. The case remains active with multiple theories but no definitive answers. Nearly 5 decades have passed since 12-year-old Dorothy Scofield walked into that department store and never walked out. The investigation has spanned generations, from the original detectives who first responded to Lena Scofield's frantic call to Chief Balkin, who continues to pursue the truth decades later. The case has produced composite sketches, failed polygraphs, family accusations, and suspicious circumstances. Yet Dorothy's fate remains unknown. Whether she fell victim to someone she trusted, became the target of a stranger's violence, or met some other tragic end continues to elude investigators. For the Scofield family, particularly sister Shelley Edwards, the search for answers continues. The questions that have haunted them for decades, who took Dorothy, why, and what happened to her, remain unanswered. The case stands as a reminder of how a single moment, a simple decision to let a child walk across a parking lot alone, can forever alter the course of multiple lives and leave a community searching for closure that may never come.